On this special Cityline Reel on Race episode, we're reflecting on the past year and checking in on whether real change has actually been made. We start off with a group of Canadian mothers who often ask themselves, is my child next? Please welcome Bea Kwame, Tanya Hales, and Heather Greenwood Davis. Good to see all of you. And I want to start off with you, Heather, because you are going through what I'm going through right now. Your boys have gone from being, these sweet little boys to turning into teens and young adults, and that's when it gets scary. I feel like that's when it gets scary for us. So how are you dealing with the level of fear about having them potentially targeted? They probably already have been targeted. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, the level of fear definitely hasn't changed over the years. It's increased, if anything. I've now got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, and those fears that I've had when they were little about what was to come are, just growing as they go older. I mean, the one thing I would say about what's happening now is that at least we're having conversations like this. For a long time, these conversations were only happening in my family or in my community, and it's really great to see that they're happening on this kind of platform.
Would you say, Heather, that it is harder for Black children now, or it was harder when we were young?
Yeah, I don't know if it's harder. I think it's different. So I think when we were young, our parents were our one source of information, and they were, they brought us the news of the day pretty much. I used to watch the 6 o'clock news with my parents, but other than that, I was pretty sheltered. Kids now are getting it on every platform all the time. And so I just find that, as parents, we have to work a lot harder to make sure that they are getting something to counteract that they're actually getting information about how valued they are from people who actually care about them.
Tanya, I want to talk to you now, and I'm going to ask you the same. Can you share your level of fear right now raising your son, and has that elevated with the murder of George Floyd, or has it always been there and it continues to be there?
I don't think I have an increased level of fear. I have an increased level of exhaustion. It is really difficult to see these images, hashtag after hashtag. Our parents watch this same thing, our grandparents watch this same thing, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And like Heather said, we are bombarded left, right, and center. If you can avoid the news, but you might not be able to avoid socials. So I think it's just really difficult, to watch it all and not ingest it and absorb it.
Tanya, we talk a lot on this show just about having these conversations with our kids. When do you start having these conversations with your kids? Can you share some of the conversations you've had with your son?
Yeah, so last year when he started his school, I got a call from his vice principal, and, it just turned out that him and another classmate were horsing around in the hallway, but the way she framed it made it seem like he assaulted the student. So when we walked home, I said, listen, you don't get the opportunity to get in trouble the same way that your classmates do. And, really, I was just like, trying to allude to potential racial bias, but not really, tell him. Unfortunately, at 8, he already has an understanding about what racism is and how it's directly impacted him.
Bea, I feel like we've talked about this in some ways, or maybe I've just seen it on your Instagram, but you are raising 2 daughters, and I know that you're really invested in making sure they have a childhood. All of us are. And that is a tough road to travel as a Black parent. So talk to me a little bit about your fears you have for them now and in the future, and how you're sort of maintaining their childhood.
So my girls, they're young. They're 3 and 6. So right now, my main fears surround kind of any type of racism that they may encounter in the educational system. So I'm thinking about things like adultification, where Black girls are seen as older than they actually are and seen as less innocent than their peers. I'm thinking about biases that lead to the disproportionate rates of Black students being disciplined or suspended or expelled. So those are the things that I'm really cognizant of right now. But in the future, I look at them and they're so joyful now. And to think about in the future, the ways that racism, sexism, or any type of violence may siphon that joy from them, that really troubles me. So I work to raise them to be able to stand up for themselves. And my little ones chant Black Lives Matter all the time and make their posters and have little protests on our balcony. But I also raise them to be joyful and hold on to that joy and that happiness for as long as they can.
Part of what you want to do is have them hold on to the fact that the problem has never been about them. And I think that is such an important lesson for us to pass on to our kids. So what is it that you want your girls to just always keep in mind when they are out there growing and evolving in the world?
I want them to know that, exactly as you said, blackness is not the burden. The burden is living in an anti-black society. And Toni Morrison so brilliantly stated that the function of racism is distraction, and it makes us have to explain ourselves over and over again, our worth and our value and who we are in the world. And I want my girls to know as they grow and move through the world that their blackness is not a deficit. So if there's going to be a lens of critique placed anywhere, it needs to be placed externally and not internally. I never want them to internalize any type of ideas of lack or deficiency because of their blackness, and instead look at the world they're living in and demand that the world explains why they're anti-black, and move through the world with that type of confidence.
Yeah, good lesson. Heather, I'm going to go back to you for a moment, because you're not only raising black boys, you're raising activists. So they are in the community and they are speaking up, and like, I beam with pride for them, like they are my boys. But does it concern you at all? Because I know even for me at my age, for my parents seeing me take shots because I am publicly talking about these things, and it still bothers them. So does it bother you at all that they are occupying those spaces?
Of course, it bothers me that someone out there might be thinking less of them, that someone out there might wish them harm, of course. But I think what they're doing is so important. And one of the things we've really stressed here is that they need to be really confident in their voice and confident in themselves and value themselves and know where to place value.
Absolutely. All great information from all of you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences with us. I really appreciate it.